Interns don't speak at this table. The CEO didn't just say it, he hurled it. The folder in his hand slammed against the polished walnut so hard the water glasses rattled. A thin ripple moved across the surface like the table itself had flinched. Soft laughter followed. Tight. Corporate. Safe. Suits leaned back, shoulders relaxed. A few exchanged knowing looks. The kind of look that says, "This will be quick." At the corner of the table, near the wall and the outlet and the forgotten power strip, the intern slowly closed his laptop. He didn't rush, didn't shrink, didn't look embarrassed. He just lowered the screen with deliberate care. The CEO stepped closer, finger extended. "You take notes, you fix the projector, you bring coffee." His voice sharpened. "You do not interrupt leadership when we're trying to save a company you barely understand." A chuckle came from the CFO. "Honestly, the confidence on these kids." Another executive smirked. "They watch one podcast and think they're visionaries." More laughter. The intern's badge, cheap plastic, clipped slightly crooked, read J. Park. No one had ever bothered to ask what the J stood for. He lifted his eyes, not to the CEO, to the table, the surface, the grain, the edges. His gaze traced it like recognition. Then he spoke, soft, clear. "I built this table." The sentence didn't land, it hovered. Like the room needed a second to understand the shape of it. The laughter died first, then the smirks. The CEO blinked once. Twice. "What did you say?" The intern didn't repeat himself. He didn't elaborate. He just sat there, calm, hands resting on the closed laptop. Across the room, near the glass wall, Mina Chen tightened her grip on the binders in her arms. She'd seen this scene before. Power humiliates the quiet. The quiet apologizes. The room moves on. She waited for the intern to back down, to say he was joking, to swallow it. Instead, he met the CEO's stare without hostility, without fear. The CFO laughed again, thinner this time. "All right, that's funny. You built the table. What's next? You founded the company?" A few nervous smiles flickered. The CEO leaned forward, invading the intern's space. "You think this is cute? You think this is the moment to try and be clever?" The intern's voice remained steady. "I wasn't joking." The temperature shifted. Subtle, but real. At the far end of the table, a gray-haired board member, silent until now, stopped pretending to scroll through his tablet. His eyes had been on the intern since the first sentence. Now they narrowed. The badge. J. Park. His fingers moved across the screen, quick but controlled. The CEO continued, louder. "This company is bleeding because of real decisions, real consequences, and you. I know why Northbridge paused the renewal," the intern said. Not raised, not rushed, just placed into the room like a fact. The CEO laughed outright. "You know, you? Yes." That single word created space. The CFO jumped in quickly. "Let me guess, you read a summary memo and now you're..." The intern looked at him, just looked. The CFO's voice faltered mid-sentence. The board member's tablet stopped moving. His breathing changed. Slow, then sharper. 2 hours earlier, this same room had smelled like citrus cleaner and executive confidence. Kestrel Systems, a company whispered about in tech circles, built by a founder no one had ever really seen. Jun Park, immigrant, architect, the mind behind the scaling model that allowed Kestrel to triple without collapse, the man who turned down acquisitions that would have made this board legendary, then disappeared. No interviews, no spotlight, just infrastructure that never failed. Until now. Northbridge Medical had paused renewal. Stock dipped, investors restless, and Graham Weller, the CEO, had spent the morning looking for someone to blame. Interns were safe targets. They didn't fight back. They didn't have leverage. They didn't have memory in the room. That's why when the intern cleared his throat earlier, quiet, respectful, Graham snapped. "What?" "I believe the API gateway vulnerability triggered Northbridge's audit." Graham smiled at the room like he'd been handed entertainment, and now, "Interns don't speak at this table." The echo of it still hung in the air, but something had changed. The board member's tablet reflected faint light onto his face. His eyes widened. He looked at the intern again, not as a subordinate, as a comparison, facial structure, posture, age progression. The intern sat straight but relaxed, not defensive, not arrogant, just present. The board member swallowed. "Excuse me," he said quietly. No one heard him. Graham was still speaking. "You think you understand infrastructure? You think you're qualified to diagnose enterprise?" The board member's voice cut through, sharper now. "Graham." It wasn't loud, but it landed. The CEO paused, annoyed. "What?" The board member stood slowly, tablet in hand. He walked toward the intern. The room watched. Mina's heart began to pound. She didn't know why. The board member stopped a few feet away. Up close, he studied the intern's face. The eyes, the restraint, the way he held silence without filling it. "You said," the board member began carefully, "that you built this table." "Yes," the CFO scoffed. "This is ridiculous." The board member ignored him. He lowered his voice. "Jun," the intern met his gaze. Didn't smile, didn't nod dramatically, just answered. "Yes." The single syllable didn't echo. It didn't need to. The board member's shoulders dropped slightly, as though like a puzzle piece had clicked into place. He turned the tablet around. The cap table glowed on the screen. Majority voting shares, name at the top. Jun Park, 51%. The room went silent in a way that felt physical. The CEO blinked at the screen, then at the intern, then back again. His voice cracked. "That's not possible." The board member's voice was steady now. "It is." The CFO leaned forward, face draining of color. "There has to be a mistake." "There isn't." Mina felt something break open in her chest, because she recognized the shift. The hierarchy had just cracked. The myth they spoke about in hushed admiration, the founder who vanished, wasn't a ghost. He was sitting at the corner of the table, wearing an intern badge, closing a laptop. The CEO stepped back instinctively. You're Jun Park?" The intern held his gaze. "Yes." No flourish, no anger, no satisfaction, just truth. The room recalibrated in real time. Every insult replayed in everyone's mind. You take notes, you bring coffee, interns don't speak. The board member straightened. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "the founder is in the room." And for the first time that morning, no one laughed. "The founder is in the room." The words didn't echo. They settled, heavy. No one laughed this time. Jun Park remained seated at the corner of the table, intern badge still clipped to his shirt, calm, unmoved, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Graham's face drained, then flushed. "This is absurd," he said, voice straining for authority. "You're telling me this intern is Jun Park," the gray-haired board member said evenly, "majority voting shareholder." Silence tightened around the table. The CFO, Martin, let out a shaky breath. "That can't be right." "Open the cap table," the board member said. Martin hesitated. "Open it." His fingers moved across his laptop. The screen loaded. His eyes scanned, then froze. Color drained from his face. "He holds 51.2%, Martin said, barely audible. Whispers broke out. 51? Control? Graham leaned over Martin's shoulder, scanning the screen himself. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "This is outdated," he snapped. "This has to be archived. There's no way." "It's current," the board member replied. June's gaze never left Graham. Not hostile, not triumphant, just steady. The badge on his chest caught the light again. J. Park. Graham stared at it like he was seeing it for the first time. "No," he muttered, then louder. "No. Why would the founder be pretending to be an intern?" June answered without hesitation. "I wasn't pretending." The simplicity of it made the room shift. Mina felt her heartbeat in her throat. She watched Graham's posture change, subtle but undeniable. The forward lean of dominance gave way to something tighter. "Then what was this?" Graham demanded. "Some kind of test? Some stunt?" June's voice remained level. "Observation." The word landed harder than shouting would have. Martin tried to regain footing. "This is a distraction. We're in a crisis. Northbridge is pulling out." "Yes," the board member said. "Let's talk about that." He turned his tablet toward the screen and connected it to the projector. A red downward line appeared. Stock price, timeline, escalation alerts, missed security flags. Mina recognized the timestamps immediately. She remembered forwarding some of those emails herself. "Northbridge didn't pause because of pricing," the board member said calmly. "They paused because they discovered an API gateway vulnerability." A murmur moved through the room. Graham shook his head sharply. "That's impossible." Security cleared that. "No," Jun said quietly. "They didn't. Didn't." Every head turned to him. He didn't raise his voice. "Security flagged the vulnerability twice, 3 weeks ago." He stepped toward the whiteboard and picked up a marker. The squeak of it, uncapping, sounded louder than it should have. He wrote in clean strokes, "API gateway, priority escalation ignored." Graham scoffed, but the sound lacked confidence. "And you just happened to know that?" "I sent the report," Jun replied. The room stilled. "I emailed the incident summary. It was forwarded to your office." He looked directly at Graham. "Then deprioritized." Martin's breathing grew shallow. "That's not," Jun continued, unbothered. Northbridge's audit team detected the vulnerability during due diligence. That triggered an automatic pause. He underlined the phrase once. Mina's chest burned. She remembered the email. Short, clear, bullet points. It had been buried beneath louder threads about optics and investor calls. Graham's voice cracked. If you thought it was that serious, you should have come to me. I did. 2 words. The boardroom absorbed them slowly. Graham opened his mouth, then stopped, because he remembered the brief hallway conversation, the email he skimmed, the dismissive laugh. Handle it after earnings, he had said. Jun capped the marker and faced the room. You chose optics over infrastructure. No one interrupted. You redirected redundancy funds into marketing expansion. He wrote another line on the board. Scaling model failure, root cause. Martin shook his head weakly. We were investing in growth. You were gambling with stability, Jun replied. His tone wasn't angry. It was clinical. You inherited a scaling model built to withstand rapid adoption. It required disciplined escalation protocols. He paused. Those protocols were ignored. The board member nodded once, confirming. Graham's jaw tightened. You let this happen. Jun met his gaze. I gave you room. The air shifted again. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. Mina watched the faces around the table recalibrate. Executives who had laughed minutes ago now avoided eye contact. The younger ones stared at the table's surface like it held answers. Graham tried to reclaim ground. This is corporate governance chaos, he snapped. You don't hide your identity and then ambush leadership. June's expression didn't change. I never hid my identity. You never looked. The words were precise, measured, unavoidable. Martin swallowed. What do you want? Jun didn't hesitate. Correction. The board member straightened in his chair. What's your assessment? He asked Jun, not Graham. The shift in authority was unmistakable. Jun glanced at the red stock line on the projector. The contract is recoverable, he said. Patch the vulnerability within 48 hours. Reallocate redundancy funding. Deliver revised audit documentation to Northbridge directly. His voice was steady, controlled. Command without performance. Graham stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Everyone out. Board members only. No one moved. The board member didn't even look at him. He looked at Jun, a silent question. Jun gave the slightest nod. Graham felt it. He turned, scanning the room for allegiance. He found lowered eyes, still hands, silence. You're making a mistake, he said, but it sounded smaller now. Jun stepped back toward the whiteboard. He added one final word beneath the heading. Integrity. He placed the marker down carefully. Then he turned to face the room. No badge removed yet. No grand declaration. Just quiet presence. The system doesn't fail on its own, he said. People decide to ignore it. The executives absorbed that. Mina felt something loosen deep in her chest. For once, the quiet person in the room hadn't swallowed the humiliation. He had dissected it. Graham's authority was thinning by the second, and everyone could see it. The board member folded his hands. I think, he said slowly, we need to discuss leadership. No one disagreed, because the system had recognized its builder, and the dismantling had already begun. The marker touched the board again, a thin black line, clean, controlled. Your scaling failure, Jun said quietly, isn't traffic. No one interrupted him, not anymore. He wrote 3 numbers beneath the heading, projected load, actual allocation, latency spike. You over-allocated to vanity growth, he continued, and underfunded redundancy. Martin shifted in his seat. That's not accurate, Jun didn't look at him. You redirected infrastructure reserves into marketing expansion. He circled a date. The same week Northbridge requested stress test documentation. A ripple moved through the room. Recognition. Not whispers now. Memory. Jun stepped aside so they could see the board clearly. He didn't pace, didn't dramatize. He was reading from a blueprint. The API gateway vulnerability, he said, tapping the second number, was preventable. He uncapped the marker again. A junior engineer flagged it. Mina's breath caught. She remembered the Slack message. The quiet urgency, the way it vanished under louder threads. Security escalated it, Jun continued. He wrote 2 initials on the board. They were told to deprioritize. He turned, looked directly at Graham. You said it would hurt investor confidence. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was weight. Graham's face moved through shades, red, then pale, then something brittle. That's a distortion, he snapped. You're cherry-picking. Jun opened his laptop. The projector shifted. An email thread filled the wall, time-stamped, unedited. We'll handle this after earnings. Don't escalate. No one breathed. Graham stared at his own words magnified across 12 feet of wall. That's out of context, he said, but it came out thin. Jen clicked again. Another message. Archive, not urgent. A low sound moved through the room. Not laughter, not outrage. Something closer to recognition, because now the humiliation had direction. And it wasn't pointed at the intern. Graham tried to rally. This is sabotage, he said, voice rising. You disappear for years, hide behind interns, and then ambush. I never disappeared, Jen replied. He capped the marker carefully. I stepped back from public operations. A beat. I never step away from oversight. The board member nodded once. Quarterly silent audits, anonymous internal reviews, founder-level access never lapsed. Mina felt her stomach drop. He had been watching. Everything. The promotions, the shortcuts, the ego. The intern badge hadn't been disguise. It had been evaluation. Graham shook his head. You let this spiral. June's eyes didn't waver. I gave you room. The words were soft, deadly. You inherited a system designed to survive rapid growth, June continued. You chose speed over stability. A pause. You chose image over integrity. Another pause. And when someone lower in status brought you risk data, his eyes flicked briefly toward Mina. You laughed. The memory flashed through the room. That sharp, dismissive chuckle. Mina felt heat rise behind her eyes. Graham tried one last defense. You don't get to moralize. You weren't making these calls. I designed the decision tree that flags escalation thresholds, Jen replied. He reached into his pocket and placed a slim metal card on the table. Brushed steel. Engraved. Founder authorization key. The board member picked it up and turned it so the room could see. Real. Documented. Undeniable. Graham stared at it like it might dissolve. You can't just walk in and reclaim. We can, the board member said calmly. He folded his hands. Graham Weller, your authority is suspended pending immediate vote. The room stilled. Procedure, not argument. All in favor of removal as CEO. Hands rose. Slow. Then more. Then almost all. Martin hesitated only a second before raising his. The vote passed. Just like that. Authority drained from Graham's posture in visible increments. Not loud, not explosive. Just gone. Security was called quietly, professional, controlled. Graham gathered his folder, movements sharp but unsteady. He scanned the room, searching for loyalty. He found silence. He walked out without applause, without resistance, without ceremony. The door closed. The boardroom exhaled. Jun reached up, unclipped his intern badge. The plastic clicked softly as he set it on the table in the same place Graham had slammed the folder earlier. Same surface, different weight. Observation period is over, he said. No smile. No satisfaction. He reopened his laptop. The Northbridge contract is recoverable, he continued evenly. Patch the gateway vulnerability within 48 hours. Restore redundancy funding. Deliver revised audit documentation directly to their board. Command without volume. The board member inclined his head. And leadership? June's gaze moved around the table, measured, assessing. We rebuild from integrity. Several executives lowered their eyes. No one argued. Mina felt something settle in her chest. Relief. Not revenge, not spectacle. Correction. June looked at her briefly, held her gaze, not as a subordinate, as someone who had seen, who had been dismissed. Then he returned to his screen. Meeting adjourned. Chairs shifted more carefully now. Conversations were quiet, no whispers of mockery, only recalibration. He was here the whole time. I didn't even realize. He was taking notes. Mina lingered at the doorway. June remained at the table, already drafting action steps, already repairing. No victory speech, no dramatic flourish, just work. The myth of the founder had dissolved into something simpler. A man, calm, precise. Unmoved by humiliation, power didn't need volume, it didn't need performance. It didn't even need a title, it just operated. As the room emptied completely, Jin finally looked up. The boardroom felt different, quieter, honest. Some people don't need authority to command a system. They built it, and when that system forgets, they remind it. If Jun's story moved you, don't just watch. Act. Share this video with someone who's ever been underestimated in a room that thought it owned them. Then do more. Look around your workplace. Who gets talked over? Who gets dismissed because of title? Who brings data that no one listens to? Amplify them. Mentor someone without visibility. Advocate for the quiet engineer in the meeting. Support young founders who don't fit the traditional mold. Invest in builders, not performers. Comment below with stories of people who were underestimated and proved everyone wrong. Let's make sure no one's warning gets ignored because their badge says intern. Subscribe to Beyond the Model Minority for more stories of invisible authority that refuses to stay invisible. Because somewhere right now, someone brilliant is sitting at the edge of a table, taking notes, watching, building, and the world has no idea who they really are. Let's make sure the next Jun Park doesn't have to wear a disguise to be heard. For everyone who was told, interns don't speak here, your system remembers you. I built this table, invisible authority beyond the model minority.